Let's look at some specific passages and highlights in John's Gospel, starting with the prologue. I'll assume that you're familiar by now with the prologue from the Bible Project video and from the text itself, and from the fact that it's just an amazingly influential passage. I want to show you some background passages from Jewish writings. Both of these are in the Old Testament Apocrypha, which are part of Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, but usually not Protestant ones. Whether or not they should be canonical, they were well known in Jesus' day, and thus decent backdrops for understanding what John is communicating in his first 18 verses. Let's look at chapter 7 of the Wisdom of Solomon, starting in verse 21. I learned both what is secret and what is manifest, for wisdom, the fashioner of all things, taught me. For wisdom is more mobile than any motion. Because of her pureness, she pervades and penetrates all things. For she is a breath of the power of God and a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. Therefore, nothing defiled gains entrance into her. For she is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God and an image of His goodness. Though she is but one, she can do all things, and while remaining in herself, she renews all things. In every generation she passes into holy souls and makes them friends of God and prophets. For God loves nothing so much as the person who lives with wisdom. Compared with the light, she is found to be superior, for it is succeeded by the night, but against wisdom evil does not prevail. She reaches mightily from one end of the earth to the other, and she orders all things well. Wisdom is an eternal, divine figure here, isn't she? She sounds like the Word through whom all things were made in John 1. This passage is from Sirach, also in the Old Testament Apocrypha. It was part of the Greek Old Testament, not the Hebrew Old Testament that Jesus and his disciples would have used. So Protestants tend not to include it in their Old Testaments, but it was well known, influential, and a nice backdrop for John 1. 24:1. Wisdom praises herself and tells of her glory in the midst of her people. In the assembly of the Most High she opens her mouth, and in the presence of his hosts she tells of her glory. I came forth from the mouth of the Most High. Well, that sounds like a word, doesn't it? Or breath. And covered the earth like a mist. I dwelt in the highest heavens, and my throne was in a pillar of cloud. Well, that sounds like deity, doesn't it? Alone I compassed the vault of heaven and traversed the depths of the abyss. Over waves of the sea, over all the earth, and over every people and nation I have held sway. Well, that sounds like God, doesn't it? Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, all the qualities of the God of Israel, in wisdom, which is somehow distinct, but within God. Among all these I sought a resting place. In whose territory should I abide? Then the Creator of all things gave me a command, and my Creator chose a place for my tent. That sounds like wisdom has tented or tabernacled among us, doesn't it? He said, make your dwelling in Jacob, and in Israel receive your inheritance. Before the ages, in the beginning, He created me, and for all the ages I shall not cease to be. In the holy tent I ministered before Him, and so I was established in Zion. Thus, in the beloved city He gave me a resting place, and in Jerusalem was my domain. I took root in an honored people, in the portion of the Lord, His heritage. That sounds like one of the passages in the prologue. He came to His own people. Come to me, you who desire me, and eat your fill of my fruits. That sounds like the bread of life, doesn't it? For the memory of me is sweeter than honey, and the possession of me sweeter than the honeycomb. Those who eat of me will hunger for more, and those who drink of me will thirst for more. Whoever obeys me won't be put to shame, and those who work with me won't sin. And look at verse 23. All this is the book of the covenant of the Most High God, the law that Moses commanded us as an inheritance for the congregation of Jacob. Note both what's familiar and what's strikingly different. This is bread that will make you grow hungrier for more. Wisdom will make you want more wisdom. But Jesus will satisfy. Come to me, wisdom says, and come to me, Jesus says. But here, wisdom is identified with the Torah, whereas in John's prologue, the law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The Father sent the Torah to Moses, and the Father sent Jesus to His people. But Jesus is not just Moses, nor is He even the Torah. He surpasses both. In Sirach, Israel received the Torah and was grateful and yearns for more and more. Whereas in John's Gospel, Jesus says, you received the law of Moses, but you haven't kept it. And that mirrors another twist in the prologue. He came into His own, but His own people received Him not. You can see why, as those four beasts of Ezekiel 1, the eagle was the perfect match for John. He seems to fly above the others, seeing what they see, but at a much higher distance, seeing with an eagle eye with great clarity. I really appreciate Luke Timothy Johnson's take on the Gospel of John, and I've drawn on it in this lecture. And he goes one step further, saying not only does John show you a high-altitude perspective on the Gospel, but he circles like a bird of prey, getting more and more precision on his target. Jesus, of course, is John's target, but so are we. He wants us to believe the way he does. John's prologue takes us back to wisdom traditions like this, as well as Proverbs 8, and takes us back to Genesis 1 with its word, who was with God in the beginning and through whom all things were made, wisely. So that in Jesus, as John's gospel proceeds, we see the one who sent him, and we see this only begotten Son who shows us the Father as the Lord as well. The rest of chapter 1 is a beginning before the book of signs commences. In that beginning, John the Baptist witnesses to Jesus. His witness actually overshadows his baptism of Jesus. Opponents question, as they will continue to more and more, and his disciples do both. They witness to him, they also question and fail to understand him, and yet they follow. And that prologue and beginning set the tone for the book of signs that goes from chapter 2 to the end of chapter 12, in which we get a collection of events that John refers to as signs. The orange arrows in this table of John's Gospel refer to leaving Judea or re-entering Judea, to show you that whereas the synoptics have a storyline that converges on Jerusalem as the centerpiece, John's narrative enters Judea early and keeps on coming back again and again. In fact, well over half of John's Gospel happens in Judea and Jerusalem, leaving the area of Jerusalem only in the epilogue in chapter 21 because the disciples have gone somewhere else.